For years, I waited for the perfect time to change my life. Then I realized, the perfect time was never coming. And while I was waiting, my life was passing me by. For many years, I was waiting. I was waiting for the right time. The right job. The right money. The right place. The right moment. I kept telling myself, soon, I would start. Soon, I would change. Soon, I would do the things I really wanted to do. But there was one problem. Soon never came. My name is Ethan. I was 35 years old when I finally understood that I had spent too many years waiting for a perfect life to begin. From the outside, my life looked normal. I had a good job. I had a small apartment. I had friends. I had a loving family. I had enough money for my needs. I was healthy. Nothing was seriously wrong. But inside, I felt like I was standing in front of a door. I could see the life I wanted on the other side. But I never opened the door. I always had a reason. I am too busy. I don't have enough money. I need more confidence. I need more time. Maybe next year. Those words became part of my life. I said them so often that I stopped noticing them. Every morning, I woke up with plans. I wanted to study English. I wanted to write. I wanted to learn guitar. I wanted to travel. I wanted to exercise more. I wanted to spend more time with my parents. I wanted to become a better version of myself. But then the day started. My phone rang. Emails arrived. Work became busy. Messages came in. One small problem became another. By evening, I was tired. I looked at my plans and said, not today. Maybe tomorrow. Tomorrow always sounded better. Tomorrow felt like a beautiful place. Tomorrow had more time. Tomorrow had more energy. Tomorrow had fewer problems. So I kept moving my life into tomorrow. One day, I looked at my English notebook. It was sitting on my desk. The first pages were full. The rest were empty. I had bought that notebook almost 1 year earlier. I had written on the first page, English, my new beginning. I smiled sadly. My new beginning had been waiting for almost a year. Beside the notebook was a book. I had wanted to read it for 6 months. Still unopened. In the corner of the room was my guitar. I had bought it because I wanted to learn to play. It was covered with dust. I looked around my apartment. There were so many small things that represented promises I had made to myself. A pair of running shoes I rarely used. A camera I wanted to take on a trip. A notebook full of ideas for stories. A small box of English books. Everything seemed to say the same thing. Maybe one day. I sat on the sofa. For a moment, I felt very tired. Not because I had done too much, but because I had postponed too much. I had spent years carrying unfinished promises. And unfinished promises are heavy. That evening, I called my mother. We talked for a few minutes. She asked, "How are you?" "I'm fine." She was quiet. Then she said, "You always say that." I smiled. What should I say? The truth. I looked at the floor. I feel stuck. She did not answer immediately. Then she said, "Come home this weekend." So I did. My parents lived about an hour away from the city. Their house was small. It had a garden behind it. My mother loved flowers. My father loved trees. Whenever I visited them, I felt something inside me slow down. There was no pressure to be successful. No need to hurry. No one asked me how much money I made. No one asked how impressive my life looked. They simply asked if I was okay. When I arrived, my father was in the garden. He was standing beside an old apple tree. The tree was beautiful. Its branches were wide. Its leaves were green. There were small apples growing on it. I walked toward him. "Dad." He turned and smiled. "You came." "Yes." "You look tired." I laughed softly. Everyone says that. Maybe everyone is right. We sat beneath the tree. My father poured me some tea. For several minutes, we said nothing. I watched the leaves move in the wind. Then he asked, "What are you waiting for?" I looked at him. "What?" "You look like a man who is waiting." I smiled. "Maybe I am." "For what?" I thought about it. "The right time." He looked at me. "The right time for what?" I started listing things. To learn English. To write. To travel. To exercise. To spend more time with Mom. To change my job. To do something meaningful. My father listened. Then he asked, "And when will the right time come?" "I don't know." He smiled gently. "Maybe that is the problem." I looked at him. "What do you mean?" He pointed toward the apple tree. "Do you remember when this tree was small?" "Yes." "You could hold the whole tree with 2 hands." I laughed. "That sounds impossible." It was almost that small. "And now look at it." I looked up. The branches moved slowly above us. "How long did it take?" "Many years." "Did you wait for the perfect weather?" "No." "Did you wait until you had more time?" He smiled. "No." "Did you wait until you knew exactly how big it would become?" "No." He touched the tree. "I planted it. Then I watered it. Then I waited." I smiled. "So you waited?" "Yes." "But there is a difference." "What difference?" I did not wait before I started. His words made me quiet. He continued. "People often say they are waiting. But sometimes they are not waiting. They are avoiding." I looked down. The word hurt. Avoiding. Maybe he was right. I had not been waiting for the perfect time. I had been afraid of an imperfect beginning. My father looked at me. "You don't need a perfect day to plant a tree. You only need to plant it." The garden became quiet again. A bird landed on a branch above us. I watched it. Then I asked, "What if I start and fail?" My father smiled. "Then you learn." "What if I start and people laugh?" "Then they laugh." "What if I am not good enough?" "You will become better." "What if the timing is wrong?" He looked at me carefully. "Ethan, the timing will never be perfect." That sentence stayed with me. The timing will never be perfect. That evening, after dinner, my father gave me a small brown notebook. I had seen it before. It was simple. No title. No special design. Just a brown cover and many blank pages. I opened it. "What should I write?" He said. "Write the things you keep saying you will do someday." I smiled. That could take a long time. Good. So I began. Learn English. Write a story. Learn guitar. Exercise. Visit mom and dad more often. Travel. Read books. Spend less time on my phone. Take care of myself. The list became longer. I looked at it. Then my father asked, "How many of these things need a perfect time?" I looked again. None. I could start almost all of them tomorrow. Some needed money. Some needed planning. But most needed only one thing: a beginning. I closed the notebook. That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about one sentence. I did not wait before I started. I thought about the apple tree. It had started as something small. It did not know how tall it would become. It did not know how many apples it would grow. It simply began. I wondered if I could do the same. The next morning, I woke up early. For the first time in many months, I did not reach for my phone. I sat beside the window. The morning light was soft. The city was still quiet. I opened the brown notebook. At the top of a blank page, I wrote, "Today." Not tomorrow. Not someday. Today. Then I wrote one small thing. Study English for 10 minutes. I looked at the clock. 10 minutes. That was all. It seemed almost too small. But I smiled. Because for the first time, I was not waiting anymore. I was beginning. The first day was not special. Nothing magical happened. I studied English for 10 minutes. I read a short story. I learned 5 new words. Then I stopped. I wanted to do more. But I decided not to make a big promise. I had made too many big promises before. This time, I wanted something simple. 10 minutes. Every day. That evening, I opened my notebook again. I wrote. Day 1 I started. Those 3 words made me smile. The next morning, I studied again. 10 minutes. Then 15. The third day, I did not feel like studying. I was tired. Work had been difficult. My first thought was, "I'll do it tomorrow." The old voice had returned. I looked at the notebook. Then I remembered my father. You do not need a perfect day to plant a tree. So I studied for 5 minutes. Only 5. It was not much. But I kept the promise. That night, I wrote. Day 3, I showed up even when I did not feel ready. Something slowly changed. I began to understand that starting was not the hardest part. Continuing was. The mind always had a reason to wait. I'm tired. I have work. I'm not in the mood. I'll do it better tomorrow. But I started to see the pattern. There would always be a reason. If I waited until I felt perfect, I might wait forever. One Saturday, I decided to open the book that had been sitting on my table for 6 months. I made tea. I sat near the window. I opened the first page. The first few pages were easy. Then I became bored. My phone was beside me. I wanted to check it. I thought, maybe I'll read later. I almost closed the book. Then I remembered something. Waiting had already taken 6 months. I did not want to give it another day. So I continued. 10 pages. Then 20. By the end of the morning, I had read almost half the book. I closed it and smiled. Not because the book was amazing. Because I had finally done something I had been waiting to do. That feeling was different. It was quiet. But it was strong. I was beginning to trust myself again. A few days later, I found my guitar. I cleaned the dust from it. I sat down. I tried to play. The sound was terrible. I laughed. Then I tried again. My fingers hurt. The notes were wrong. But I kept going. For 15 minutes. Then 20. I recorded myself. When I listened to the recording, I wanted to delete it. I sounded terrible. But I did not delete it. I saved it. I wanted to remember the beginning. Because one day, if I became better, I wanted to hear the first sound. The imperfect sound. The sound of a man who finally stopped waiting. At work, things began to change too. I had always wanted to ask my manager for more responsibility. But I had waited. I told myself. Maybe when I know more. Maybe when I feel more confident. Maybe next year. One morning, I decided to ask. I walked into Sarah's office. She looked up. Ethan? Can I talk to you? Of course. I sat down. I want to take on more responsibility. She looked surprised. What changed? I smiled. I don't want to wait until I feel completely ready. She smiled. That is probably a good thing. She gave me a new project. It was difficult. I made mistakes. I had questions. Sometimes I felt lost. But I learned. And after a few weeks, I noticed something. I had been waiting to feel confident before taking action. But confidence had come after action. Not before. That lesson changed me. I started to understand that many things in life work this way. You do not always feel brave before you begin. Sometimes you become brave because you begin. You do not always feel ready before you learn. You become ready while learning. You do not always know the road before you take the first step. Sometimes the road becomes clear after you move. One evening, I visited my parents again. My father was repairing an old wooden chair. I sat beside him. You were right, I said. He smiled. About what? The perfect time. He laughed. Did it come? No. I knew it. We both laughed. Then I told him about my English. The book. The guitar. The new project at work. He listened carefully. You see? What? You did not need a perfect life. You only needed one small action. I nodded. Then he said something I did not expect. But don't make another mistake. What mistake? Do not become obsessed with starting. I looked at him. He smiled. Life is not about always doing more. Sometimes you need to rest. I thought about that. He continued. Rest is not waiting. Rest is part of the journey. Those words were important too. I had spent years waiting. Now I was afraid of stopping. I wanted to do everything. Learn English. Play guitar. Read. Exercise. Write. Work. Travel. I wanted to make up for lost time. My father saw it. Slowly, he said. Trees do not grow faster because you shout at them. I laughed. That's true. Do one thing well. Then do another. I nodded. That night, I went home with a calmer heart. I wrote in my notebook. I don't need to hurry. I only need to continue. That became another important lesson. Starting is powerful. But small, steady action is what changes a life. A few weeks later, I decided to write my first story. I had been carrying the idea for years. It was not a perfect story. The writing was simple. Some parts were weak. But I finished it. When I reached the last sentence, I sat quietly. I stared at the screen. Then I smiled. I had done it. The story was not perfect. But it existed. For years, it had lived only inside my head. Now it was real. I sent it to one close friend. My hand shook when I pressed send. The next day, he replied. I like it. Then he added. You should write more. I smiled. Maybe he really liked it. Maybe he was being kind. Either way, it did not matter as much as I expected. The biggest reward had already happened. I had started. That evening, I walked through the park. The trees were green. Children were playing. An old man was sitting on a bench reading. A woman was walking her dog. Everything looked ordinary. But I felt different. I had spent so much time waiting for life to become special. Now I was beginning to notice that ordinary life was already full of meaning. The morning tea. The first page of a book. A simple guitar song. A phone call with my mother. A walk in the park. One finished story. These were not big achievements. But together, they were becoming my life. Months passed. I kept the brown notebook on my desk. Every night, I wrote 1 or 2 lines. Sometimes the page was full. Sometimes I wrote only. Today was hard. Or, I was tired. Or, I started again. I learned that progress did not always feel good. Some days were easy. Some days were difficult. Some days I did nothing important. But I stopped using one bad day as a reason to give up. Before, if I missed one day of English, I often stopped for a week. If I missed one workout, I waited until Monday. If I stopped writing for a few days, I told myself I had lost my motivation. Now I understood. Missing one day was not the end. I could begin again tomorrow. But I no longer said, I'll start when Monday comes. I learned to start again on Tuesday. Or Wednesday. Or any day. There was no special door called Monday. That was another lie I had believed. One morning, I was late for work. I woke up tired. I missed my usual English practice. The old voice returned. You failed. You broke the habit. You are going back to your old life. For a moment, I believed it. Then I stopped. I took a breath. I opened the notebook. I wrote. I missed today. Then below it. But I can begin again tonight. That evening, I studied for 10 minutes. That was enough. I was learning something deeper than time management. I was learning how to forgive myself. Waiting for perfection had not only stopped me from starting. It had also made me afraid of mistakes. I thought every mistake meant I was not good enough. Now I saw mistakes differently. A mistake was information. A bad day was a bad day. It did not have to become a bad year. One afternoon, Sarah asked me to lead a small meeting. The old Ethan would have said, I'm not ready. This time, I said yes. Before the meeting, I was nervous. Very nervous. But I remembered my first guitar recording. My first English lesson. My first story. None of them had been perfect. But each one had taught me something. So I walked into the room. I spoke slowly. I made mistakes. I corrected them. The meeting was not perfect. But it went well. Afterward, Sarah smiled. You seem much more confident. I laughed. I think I finally understand something. What? I stopped waiting to feel confident. She nodded. That's usually when confidence begins. That sentence stayed with me. Confidence does not always come before action. Sometimes action creates confidence. One Sunday, I decided to visit my parents without planning anything. I simply went. My mother was in the kitchen. My father was in the garden. I helped my mother prepare lunch. Then I walked outside with my father. We stood beneath the apple tree. The tree was bigger now. There were more apples than before. I touched one. Do you remember when you planted it? My father smiled. Yes. You didn't know it would become this big. No. What if it had died? He thought for a moment. Then I would plant another one. I laughed. That's simple? That's simple. I looked at him. What if I start something and it fails? Then you learn. What if I lose time? You already lose time when you do nothing. His answer was quiet. But it was true. We walked slowly. Then he said, Ethan, people often think the worst choice is failure. It isn't. The worst choice is never trying. I looked at the apple tree. I thought about all the things I had postponed. The trip I never took. The stories I never wrote. The guitar I never learned. The English I never practiced. The calls I delayed. The dreams I kept putting into tomorrow. What if I had started earlier? Maybe I would be better today. Maybe I would not. But I would have learned. That was the part that hurt. Not the time I had lost. The experiences I had never lived. That evening, my mother asked me to stay for dinner. I said yes. Before, I often left early because I thought I had too much to do. That night, I stayed. We ate slowly. My mother told stories from when I was a child. My father laughed. I laughed too. After dinner, we sat outside. The sky became dark. I realized something. There would never be a perfect time to spend more time with the people I loved. There would always be work. There would always be problems. There would always be another Monday. If I waited for life to become quiet, I might wait forever. So I stayed. And I was glad I did. A few days later, I received an invitation to travel with a friend. My first reaction was, maybe later. Then I stopped. Why later? I had enough money. I had enough days off. There was no real reason to wait. I said yes. The trip was not perfect. The hotel was small. The weather changed. We got lost one afternoon. We laughed about it. And that became one of my favorite memories. On the way home, I looked through the photos. They were not perfect. Some were blurry. Some were badly framed. But I loved them. Because they were evidence that I had gone. I had not waited. I had lived. That night, I wrote in my notebook. The perfect time did not come. But the good time was already here. I read those words again. The perfect time did not come. But the good time was already here. Maybe that was the secret. Life was never going to give me a perfect morning, a perfect year, a perfect body, a perfect job, a perfect plan. There would always be something missing, something difficult, something uncertain. And if I needed everything to be right before I began, I would never begin. One evening, I sat by my window with a cup of tea. The city lights were shining outside. I opened my notebook. I looked at the first page. It said, "Today." I smiled. That one word had changed my life. Not tomorrow. Not someday. Today. I wrote a few simple lessons. Start before you feel ready. Small steps are still steps. Do not wait for perfect. Rest when you need to. Begin again after a bad day. Do not compare your beginning with someone else's middle. Today is enough. I closed the notebook. I felt peaceful. Not because everything was finished, but because I was finally moving. 1 year after my father gave me the brown notebook, I returned to the garden. The apple tree was full of fruit. I stood beneath it and looked up. I remembered the first conversation. "What are you waiting for?" At the time, I thought my father was asking about my plans. Now I understood. He was asking about my life. How much of it was I willing to postpone? How many mornings would I give to later? How many dreams would I keep on a shelf? How many conversations would I delay? How many times would I say, "I'll do it when the time is right"? The answer could have been endless. Because the perfect time never came. It never came for my English. It never came for my writing. It never came for my guitar. It never came for my trip. It never came for my family. The time was never perfect. But I had learned that perfect was not necessary. Good enough was enough. One morning was enough to start. 10 minutes was enough. One page was enough. One sentence was enough. One phone call was enough. One small step was enough. My father walked toward me. "You look different." I smiled. "I feel different." He sat beside me. "Did you finally find the perfect time?" I laughed. "No." He laughed too. "I knew you wouldn't." We sat quietly. Then I said, "I found something better." "What?" "Today." He smiled. I looked at the tree. When I was waiting, I thought time was the problem. And now I know fear was the problem. Fear of failing. Fear of making the wrong choice. Fear of starting too late. Fear of not being ready. My father nodded. "And what did you learn?" I thought carefully. I learned that waiting feels safe. But it has a hidden price. What price? You lose the chance to live. He looked at me. I continued. When I waited, I was safe. I did not fail. I did not look foolish. I did not make mistakes. But I also did not grow. My father smiled. "That is true." I looked at the apples above us. A small wind moved through the leaves. Do you know what I think? What? I used to think mistakes were the opposite of success. And now? I think mistakes are part of moving forward. He nodded. That is a better way to live. We sat there for a long time. Then my father said, "Remember something." "What?" "Do not wait for life to become easy. Learn to live while it is difficult. His words became one of the most important lessons of my life. Because life did not suddenly become easy. I still had busy days. I still had fear. I still had problems. Sometimes I still wanted to hide. Sometimes I still wanted to say, maybe tomorrow. But now I recognized the voice. And when I heard it, I asked, what small thing can I do today? That question changed everything. If I was afraid to write, I wrote one sentence. If I was too tired to exercise, I walked for 10 minutes. If English felt difficult, I learned 5 words. If I missed my family, I called. If I wanted to travel, I started planning. If I wanted to change, I took one step. I stopped asking, when will I have enough time? I started asking, what can I do with the time I have? That was the difference. One evening, I sat in my apartment and looked around. The guitar was still there. But it was no longer dusty. My English notebook was full. My books were being read. My camera had pictures from places I had finally visited. My writing was not perfect. But there were pages. Many pages. My life had not changed because of one huge decision. It had changed because I had stopped postponing small decisions. One after another. Day after day. I had finally learned to trust small beginnings. I also learned something about dreams. Dreams do not always need a big plan. Sometimes they need a small place in your day. 10 minutes. 20 minutes. 1 hour. A little space. A little attention. That is enough to keep a dream alive. The problem is not always that we have no time. Sometimes we simply keep waiting for a large amount of time. We say, when I have a free weekend. When I have more money. When work becomes easier. When I feel more confident. When I know what I am doing. But those moments may never come. So start with the time you have. Start with the energy you have. Start with the knowledge you have. Start while you are still afraid. Start while you are still learning. Start while your hands are still shaking. Because the beginning does not need to be beautiful. It only needs to be real. I think about that little boy who once wanted to become a writer. He waited many years. He thought he needed permission. He thought he needed confidence. He thought he needed to be better. He thought the right moment would arrive. But the right moment was not something that arrived at my door. It was something I created by opening the door myself. That is what I understand now. The perfect time is not waiting somewhere in the future. There is no perfect Monday. No perfect January. No perfect year. No perfect age. There is only this moment. This morning. This afternoon. This evening. This life. And if you keep waiting for everything to be right, you may wake up one day and realize that years have passed. That was my greatest fear. Not failure. Not mistakes. But waking up at 60. And realizing I had spent my whole life preparing to live. I do not want that anymore. I want to live while I am still here. I want to learn while I am still curious. I want to love while I still have people to love. I want to write while I still have stories inside me. I want to travel while my feet can carry me. I want to call my parents while they can still answer. I want to play guitar even when the music is not perfect. I want to speak English even when I make mistakes. I want to begin. Again and again. Because now I know something. You do not need to be ready to begin. Beginning is how you become ready. You do not need confidence. Action can create confidence. You do not need a perfect plan. The first step can show you the next one. You do not need a perfect life. You only need the courage to live the imperfect one you already have. One morning, I opened my brown notebook again. The pages were almost full. I turned to the last page. For a moment, I did not know what to write. Then I wrote. I was waiting for the perfect time. It never came. Then I realized. I did not need it. I put the pen down. I looked outside. The sun was rising. The sky was soft and golden. People were beginning their day. Cars were moving. Birds were singing. The world was not waiting for perfection. It was simply moving. And maybe that is what life asks us to do. Not to have everything ready. Not to know everything. Not to become perfect. Just to move. Slowly. Honestly. One step at a time. If you are listening to this story and there is something you have been waiting to do, maybe you know what it is. Maybe it is learning English. Maybe it is starting a new job. Maybe it is writing a book. Maybe it is taking care of your health. Maybe it is calling someone you love. Maybe it is leaving something that no longer makes you happy. Maybe it is simply believing in yourself again. Whatever it is, please do not wait for the perfect time. You may wait forever. Start small. Open the book. Write one sentence. Learn one word. Take one step. Make one phone call. Walk outside. Say yes. Say no. Begin. It may not feel important. But small beginnings have a quiet power. A small seed can become a tree. A small habit can become a new life. A small decision can change the direction of your future. And sometimes, the biggest change begins with the smallest sentence. Today, I will start. That is what I tell myself now. Not, I'll do it someday. Not, I'll start when I am ready. Not, I'll wait for the right moment. Just, today. Because tomorrow is not promised. The perfect time is not promised. But today is here. And today is enough. My name is Ethan. For many years, I was waiting. I waited for more money. More time. More confidence. More knowledge. A better job. A better plan. A better version of myself. I thought I was preparing for life. But really, I was postponing it. Then one day, I stopped waiting. I started with 10 minutes. One page. One guitar chord. One story. One phone call. One small step. And slowly, those small steps became a life. Not a perfect life. A real one. A life with mistakes. A life with fear. A life with slow mornings and difficult days. A life where I still do not know everything. But a life that is finally moving. So if you are waiting right now, waiting for the perfect time, waiting until you feel ready, waiting until life becomes easier, I want you to remember my story. The perfect time never came. And I am grateful it didn't. Because when I stopped waiting for perfection, I finally started living. And maybe you can start too. Not tomorrow. Not someday. Today. Right now. With one small step. Because you don't need the perfect time to begin. You only need to begin.